What is true? Is it true that NASA and Google are hiding the Aral Sea bed from us? Or is it true that at the bottom of the Aral Sea there are traces of the activities of the ancient civilization? What if I told you all that you were living a lie? Let's get to the bottom of this. Now you will see something that will forever change your conception of reality and the world you live in. And now go! The Aral Sea was once the fourth largest lake in the world, but the wrong decisions of Soviet scientists have forever destroyed this once rich in natural beauty. The water that fed the Aral Sea was greatly consumed by the Soviet industry to irrigate the cotton fields, and the two rivers, the Amur Darya and Sur Darya, which carried the water to the sea, failed to cope with their task after such a perfect miracle of nature. And now I suggest you get in the time machine with me and see this disaster for yourselves. We can see that since 1973 the Aral Sea has been getting shallower and shallower. In 1989 it split into two bodies of water, and then everything went on to the fact that the Aral Sea can be only talked about rather than seen with our own eyes. What I can say about it in the light of our topic: no great loss without some small gain. And now we can see, thanks to satellite images, the bottom of the dried up sea. Isn't it interesting? Of course it is. The truth is that we can see only a tiny fraction of the most interesting things. The rest of the knowledge is accessible only to the chosen few. And now I will explain to you what I'm talking about. Let's try to look at the bottom of the sea. From a certain height it becomes impossible. Look at everything: shores, villages, roads, not only the bottom of the dried up sea. And maybe historical pictures can help us? Let's give it a try. All attempts are futile. Everything is wrapped up in a green screen with allegedly low-resolution images. I was extremely surprised by this fact because I used to be able to watch them freely. That was only a couple of years ago. I swear to you, there was a lot of interesting stuff in there. I didn't think Google would send them to the top secret file shelf. But what's left is enough to understand why it was done. So, here we go. Let's see what I found interesting for you. And the first mark, I called it a mega trail. Why mega? Look at the giant. Let's measure it, and now you'll see that these arrays are painted for a reason. It's almost 35 kilometers long if you look carefully. What do you think its width is? Hold on tight. It's 650 meters wide. Shall we try to zoom in on it? Okay, let's try. Great. And instead of mega trail, we get mega fog. And it's in this extractor area. Could it be that bad resolution for the whole region? Let's check it out in a neighboring township. Yes, you can see the streets, houses, roads. Everything is visible. Now back to our mega trail again. And now tell me, dear friends, who or what could leave such a trail? Last attempt to bring it closer. Let's try. And everything disappeared in a fog of hopelessness. Could it be the ships that ran aground? Or could it be oil exploration? My personal opinion is that it could have been made by some huge mechanism which could have been engaged in terraforming or shaping the landscape. And let's look at the historical pictures. Maybe it appeared quite recently. We see it present in all the photos. By the way, in 2009 it can be seen more than well. In 2003 we see that it's already at the water's edge. Could it be the shore washed away by the strong waves? No. In 2002 we see it under the water. You can say, well, lines and lines. Maybe it's some kind of natural formation, and what you say is your sick imagination. But fortunately for me, and for those who want to understand the true nature of these things, Google Earth and NASA haven't yet managed to paint over everything. And we have proof that I'm not crazy. The next mark is called Megatrace 2, and it gives us a chance to look at everything in more detail, and we can see that this is already another giant trail, still in good quality. Here we can see that this is not a road. All the lines of this trail run parallel and suddenly ends. And here there are just a huge number of such traces. Next to each other we can see smaller traces, and also deposits of sand and silt. Nearby is mark called Crazy Roads. I deliberately named this mark to make it clear that no road would loop so senselessly. Let's measure our giant trail. I think it makes sense to measure the width, because its length is impossible to determine because of the quality of the photos that hide it. So it's almost 400 meters wide. Think about that. That's almost half a kilometer. And it's not the length, it's the width. And now, a strange peculiarity already concerning not the trail itself, but the approach to conceal these facts. We have a historical photo of 2013 and 2020, which in quality and color rendering is much worse than 2013. Do you think, dear friends, that we are dealing with the deterioration in the quality of the picture, the technique, or the media on the Google Earth hard drive has gotten smaller? Or is it an attempt by someone to hide the undeniable facts of the existence of an ancient civilization that existed long before ours? What do you think? I'm very interested to know your opinion in the comments. And now let's go up to the point where the program will give us an acceptable image. And what will we see? And we will see nothing. Interesting, isn't it? Let's move on. A label called the size of the ship. This is especially for those who think these footprints may have been left by ships. This footprint is about 150 meters wide, not to mention the previous footprints have a kilometer wide or more, but even this footprint is more than twice the width of the largest ship in the world. For those who didn't know, the Nock Nevis is 69 meters wide, and now imagine what kind of machinery was it that left a footprint of this size. The next mark is a ship that went down, and as we can see, there are no lines coming from it. Let's measure this ship to be sure. It turns out to be exactly 50 meters. Well, compare yourself in your head 50 and 650 meters, or at least 350. And if this does not give you confidence, let's see on the map what Ignat looks like this 50-meter ship in comparison with the trail. Consequently, these lines have nothing to do with ships. The next marking shows us that the mechanism that worked at the bottom of the Aral Sea performed there some technical work with the soil. At the place where the trail ends, we see a huge pile of sand. This let us know that this cannot be traces from nets or trawls. Now imagine if a huge ship can be hauled a relatively small anchor. Then, with what force would a plow have to be pulled across the bottom to leave furrows this deep? And most importantly, why? For what purpose? A little to the east we see a sharp turn of another trail at right angles. Now tell me, can our machinery perform such maneuvers? Alright, let's move on. The label is a grid of lines. Look closely here to see how these lines run parallel to each other. How do you explain this precision? I'm at a loss for words. Maybe you know. Also here we can see lines that are perpendicular to the first one. Continuing with the previous mark, we see gigantic number of lines in different directions. Let's try to become more familiar with the objects of the Aral Sea. You probably have already noticed that in the center of this sea there is a strange island with an even more strange geoglyph in the form of a star and a city nearby. The tag is called Aral Sea. This mysterious island itself is no less mysterious than these stripes on the bottom of the Aral Sea. The name of the city of Kantubek, which you see on the Google map, is a common name. In fact, this city has another secret code name among the military cities of the former Soviet Union, and that name is Aral Sea. What is the secret about this city and why it's located on the island? And the fact is that since the 20th century the Soviet Union began developing biological weapons, and 3 islands were chosen as candidates for the role of secret testing grounds, one in the White Sea, another on Lake Sereger, and the third rebirth island in the Aral Sea. The second option was chosen, but after World War II, the Soviet military leadership decided that the center would have to be moved further from the borders to the most inaccessible places, and the high temperature with a high UV index prevented the possible accidental spread of infection. And the presence of salt water around the island provided not only safety in terms of accessibility of the military center, but also, as is known, has a deleterious effect on the membranes of bacteria, which is why the seawater is used nasally to treat acute respiratory infections. That is why Aral Sea became a top-secret biological weapons testing facility, which was primarily anthrax and bubonic plague spores. The city's population was about 1500 people. Let's see further to understand how the military lived there, what good masonry, and the quality of the bricks themselves. And this is the clubhouse where the officers and their wives went on Friday nights, and on weekends they had picnics on this shore. And this is the boiler room of the ranch, autoclaves for sterilization of equipment used to run a lot of steam for the laboratory complex. And this was despite the fact that there were no sources of drinking water on the island. It was delivered by a special barge and then brought to the site by a special pipeline. It was made of such alloys that it was not subject to corrosion. Subsequently, all the pipes were removed from the island by the looters. And this is the partially destroyed laboratory area. It was 2 kilometers away from the administrative area and was completely isolated by several rows of barbed wire. This location was not chosen by chance. The experiments were conducted mainly on monkeys. They were exposed in a cage outside, while an airplane above them sprayed spores of deadly diseases. Then they were taken indoors and watched the dynamic of the disease. Simply put, how they would say goodbye to their lives. So the laboratory was located away from the settlement so that the deadly winds would never reach it. But there have been misfires, and we know of a case where a plague cloud covered 2 fishermen, well, both dead. The horror stories don't end there. Stalkers like to make pilgrimage to these places, and according to their stories, some of the buildings in the complex looked a lot like prison barracks. Thus, who knows who else beside monkeys were experimented on here. let me give you a chance to stretch your brains. What do you think about this infernal geoglyph in the shape of a starburst? I will look through the historical photos and you can think about it. So, in this place everything must be perfect, and God forbidden, something unforeseen happens. So they took the slightest wind direction into account when landing planes here. That is why the airport here is built in the form of a windrows. Nearby we can see the concentrate slabs for the runways, which are now being looted by looters with great pleasure, as well as other valuables. All this hellishness ceased to exist in 1991, and I will explain to those who cannot guess why. 1991 was the year of the collapse of the USSR. Okay, let's get back to our topic, brush and brush 2. Here too we see many parallel lines, as if they were made by some kind of brush or comb. These lines could be explained by the mooring of boats in an already shallow sea. But first, we do not see here any objects because of which there could be such a huge number of boats. Second, the boats had to moor in strict parallel to each other, which is not logical at all. Usually all ships are docked at proven locations, not different ones. And third, the directions of two streams of lines can still be understood. But why float on the shallows parallel to the shore? Alright, let's move on. Just look at this reversal and triangle. Oh no, I was wrong. It's not even a triangle. It's a rhombus. Look closely. But wait a minute, it's not even just a rhombus, but a double rhombus or a digital 8. I don't know, for example. I don't even know what to say about that. Ancient civilization decided to make fun of us by leaving us such puzzles. Of course, some might say it's just new rods on the bottom, but let me show you what the rods look like against these wonders of the world. This is the rod. Here you can clearly see the double track of the wheels of cars. And now our rods. Feel the difference? I think it's clear now. Here are our tracks. Here's another one, and here's the bigger one. Look at the time photo. December. And how beautifully the water is frozen. What a color. How beautiful nature. Stop. Is that the whole layer taken? And another one, look, and it goes even farther, behind the shoreline. Look at that. Now some nerd gonna say it's air-water erosion. Let him look at it, right there. That's erosion. This was the river delta, and its riverbed looks like. And there are no rectangular river channels that end at the bottom of the sea. Whoa, that's something special. But that's not all. There are a lot of shocking information ahead. But for now, let's take a little break and look at the ships in what was once a major port city on the shores of the Aral Sea. Munak. Yes, it's a ship graveyard. We can even see ghosts here. And now there are other ships here. Ships of the desert. Camels. These camels probably don't even think they are grazing at the bottom of the sea. Did you take a break? Alright, now let's go. You know, I sometimes play chess, maybe even quite well, at the level of candidate master of sports. So now we will check the official signs, and as you can already guess,
at the end of this video we will checkmate it. Do not doubt. You may say, what's the big deal? Gain the trail? Yes, a huge one, but nothing new. And here the thing, before this trace was only at the bottom of the Aral, and now you can personally observe it on the shore. Do you see the shoreline nearby? And for reliability, let's leave the earliest historical photo from 1973, and we can see that yes, it was on the land, and as usual, it's crossed by other, smaller canals. What a lucky coincidence for the skeptics! We can even see a tiny road here for comparison. At least they say that these smaller canals crossing the big one are roads too. Moving on. Next mark. Reveal check. Why I call this mark so? Because it's very hidden and invisible to the eye of the observer. But nevertheless, it reflects the idea of what is happening to an even greater extent. Again, you can see a huge trace with parallel edges, and again, it's in even more distant place from the sea. Let's look at an old photo. You can see this relief even in a vague photo from 1985. Another trail with a right angle. It's obvious that it's very ancient. Look how fantastic it looks from above. Again, these footprints are everywhere. And this one is interesting because we can see side by side exactly what the erosion looks like. And it's nothing like what we are dealing with. And now, I will tell you how official science can explain what you see. Water will walk from one side to other and then evaporate, leaving its traces here. Or that the sinkholes here are formed parallel to each other, just on this slack heap. Now, let's hear what I have to say. The basic method of science is observation. So, what do we see? Traces left by the huge machinery that leveled this heap, and now everything falls into place, and there is no need to make up fairy tales about natural formations, and everything becomes clear with the footprints. Look at the picture of the many parallel footprints that it leaves. But only the technique was in ancient times. Here you can safely say that I'm crazy, because what technique can we talk about? And now it's time to checkmate the official science. Only those who hunger for the truth have finally gotten to this point. So, the Aral Sea appeared, according to the absolute dating by radiocarbon method, about 18,000 years ago, when the mountain glaciers of the Pamir and Tian Shan began to melt actively. The period from 18 to 15,000 years ago, there was a constant abundant inflow of river water into the lake basin. This is openly recognized geological information. You can freely find it in any sources. Consequently, the bottom of the Aral Sea is at least 15,000 years old. However, in 2001, when large areas of the Aral seabed were already exposed, the Kazakh archaeological expedition discovered that two submerged in the sand city. Not only were these cities submerged, they were also under a layer of sand. Of course, now historians had some way to identify this fact, because this is for a minute, not some shards, and the whole two cities, which cannot be thrown away anywhere. And despite the statement of geologists,
They attributed these constructions to the overflow that was 500 years ago and say that the sea was not yet a full flowing, so just decided for all. Before that, there was no such theory, but this certainly can be understood. They lose all their titles and even work if they will openly declare that these structures more than 15,000 years old. Now, let's see, and it's even on our map. There are not many photos. This kind of sensation is not good for the official sites. You know what I'm talking about. The site of these cities is named Kaduri. The greatest interest was attracted by the construction with a perimeter of 42 on 30 meters, the foundation of which was made of stone slabs 1.5 meters high. Let's look again at the historical photo from 1973 to make sure that this place was underwater. Yes, it was. And my point is that if the facts don't fit with the theory, then we need to change the theory, not throw out or modify the facts. And that's checkmate in this game called Deceive the Public. It's all now clear why we can see some areas of the Aral bottom, why they are no longer of high quality. I hope you enjoy my investigation. There are many more interesting things to come.